Welcome back, everyone. Ready to take another deep dive.
Always.
Today, we're heading back to ancient Sumer. Now we've covered the basics, the ziggurats, the inventions. But today, we're going deeper, like way deeper, into the heart of their society.
Right. Think daily life. Like, who were these people? What were their roles? How did their society actually function? And what did their economy look like? We'll get into all that.
And as always, we're using some seriously cool sources. I'm talking actual cuneiform tablets, and of course, the latest research from modern scholars.
Exactly. Piecing together the full picture.
Okay, so I think we tend to picture ancient civilizations as kind of, well, simple, like a pyramid. King at the top, everyone else below.
Right. Very top down.
But Sumer, I'm hearing, wasn't exactly like that, was it?
It's more complex. Sumerian society, it was really more like a tapestry,
Yeah.
all these interconnected social classes, each with its own distinct roles and responsibilities. So yeah, you had the kings and elites at the top, obviously. They enjoyed the perks, right?
Of course, who wouldn't? But then you had the priests. And that's where it gets kind of interesting. Because temples weren't just for worship, were they?
No, no, not at all. They were like these vibrant centers for administration, economic activity, like the ancient version of, I don't know, city hall and a trading center all in one.
So religion and daily life were totally intertwined, like
Mhm.
managing resources, record keeping. It wasn't just about, praying to the gods. It was about running the city.
Exactly. And speaking of record keeping, you can't forget the scribes meticulously documenting everything on those clay tablets. Can you imagine?
The pressure. One little slip of the stylus.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And then he had the merchants, the farmers, artisans, all contributing to this bustling city life.
So it's sounding less like a simple pyramid and more like,
It's like a bustling city, a lot going on.
exactly, a lot going on. But of course, we have to address the fact that like many ancient societies, Sumer also had slavery.
Right, that's unfortunately true. They occupied the lowest rung of the social ladder. It's a dark side to this otherwise vibrant picture we're painting.
Definitely. But even with that in mind, it's clear this wasn't just a simple hierarchy. So this begs the question, was there any social mobility? Could, like, a hardworking farmer climb the ranks?
Well, it wasn't impossible, and this is what makes studying these cuneiform tablets so fascinating. We actually find stories of individuals who defied the odds. For example, there's a record of this really talented scribe who rose through the ranks and ended up a high-ranking official, advising the king.
Wow, from scribe to royal advisor, that's impressive.
It is. Imagine the dedication, the skill to achieve that, especially in what we tend to think of as such a rigid system.
Okay, so there was hope, but realistically, how often did this happen? Was that scribe just a total exception, or was Sumerian society more, I don't know, more fluid than we think?
Well, while these stories do offer a glimmer of hope, it's important to remember that for the vast majority of people, social mobility was pretty limited. Your birth pretty much determined your path in life. But now let's shift gears a bit. Let's talk about women in Sumer.
Okay, yeah, because when we think about ancient civilizations, we often just picture women, confined to the home.
Right, it's a common misconception.
So you're telling me Sumer was different?
What's remarkable about Sumerian society is that women had a surprising amount of legal rights and economic power too. They could
Yeah.
own property, engage in trade, even head households. That's pretty different from a lot of other ancient societies.
That's huge. We're not just talking about theoretical rights.
Yeah.
These women were really shaping their society.
Mm.
And speaking of remarkable women, we can't forget Enheduanna, right?
Absolutely. High Priestess, ND, a poet.
And considered the first known author in history.
That's right. Her hymns and poems, etched in cuneiform, they give us this incredible glimpse into Sumerian religious beliefs and the prominent role women played within the temple.
So we're not just talking about, like, powerful goddesses in mythology.
Yeah.
We're talking about real women, like Enheduanna, wielding influence and shaping the culture.
Right. And it's not just speculation. Archaeological evidence backs this up. Like, if you ever get the chance to visit the British Museum, check out their Sumerian collection. You'll see depictions of women in all sorts of roles, religious ceremonies, marketplaces. Really challenges our assumptions about gender roles back then.
Like, we're piecing together this whole hidden history,
Mhm.
one cuneiform tablet at a time. But all this talk about bustling marketplaces, it brings us to, well, the Sumerian economy. These
Mm.
people weren't just surviving, right? They were innovating.
They really were. Agriculture formed the backbone of their economy, of course, cultivating barley, herding cattle. But what's really impressive is their irrigation systems,
Mm.
seriously sophisticated.
Yeah, we're talking 4000 BCE here. It blows my mind to think about how they were, harnessing the power of nature to create this thriving agricultural system.
Truly, but they didn't stop at feeding
Right,
themselves.
they didn't just stop there. I mean, I've heard Sumer was this major trade hub connected to, like, seriously far-off lands.
That's right. Picture their trade networks stretching from the Indus Valley all the way to Anatolia. We're talking a vast network spanning continents. They transported everything: textiles, pottery, precious metals, even luxury items like lapis lazuli, this beautiful deep blue stone, highly prized in the ancient world, and it came all the way from Afghanistan. So that shows you the reach and the complexity of these trade routes.
Okay, so we've got barley, cattle, luxury goods being traded across vast distances. How did they keep track of all of this? I mean, did they even have money back then?
This is where it gets even more interesting. You see, Sumer is where we see the very beginnings of money and formal record keeping, crucial steps in human, economic development.
Hold on. Are we talking the first coins ever? What did this early money even look like?
Not quite coins, but they were using standardized units of silver as a form of currency. Think of it as a precursor to coinage. It made trading so much easier, allowed them to track value in a more consistent way.
That's a game changer.
Yeah.
And how did they keep records of all these transactions? I'm picturing like an ancient accountant hunched over a clay tablet with his stylus.
Not far off. Those cuneiform tablets weren't just for epic poems and royal decrees. They were used to meticulously record transactions, debts, inventories, everything. So these records, they provide us with this unbelievable window into the inner workings of the Sumerian economy, their accounting practices, even their legal system.
Okay, so they're farming, they're trading, they're inventing money, keeping detailed records. So it sounds like they were basically laying the groundwork for like the entire economic systems we use today.
It's really not an exaggeration to say that Sumerian innovations had this profound, lasting impact on later civilizations. Their economic practices, from trade to record keeping, they influence the course of history, shaping the very foundations of how we conduct business even today. Pretty amazing, right? For a civilization that was flourishing thousands of years ago.
It really is. Makes you realize how interconnected history is. Like, ideas born in ancient Sumer are still echoing in our modern world. But, I mean, a thriving society needs more than just a strong economy, right? It needs law and order. So was it just a complete free-for-all in ancient Sumer? Or did they have, like, an actual legal system?
Let's just say it wasn't the Wild West. They had a well-defined legal system, and one of the most important pieces of evidence we have is the Code of Ur-Nammu.
The Code of Ur-Nammu. The name sounds like something out of, like, an Indiana Jones movie.
Haha, I know, right? And for good reason. This code, it dates back to around 2100 BCE. So that makes it one of the oldest known legal codes in human history. It predates the famous Code of Hammurabi by centuries, so it's a pretty remarkable discovery. It gives us this detailed look into how Sumerian society actually functioned.
Okay, so it's a big deal. What kind of laws are we talking about here?
Yeah.
Did they have, like, rules against chariot parking violations?
Haha, not quite. But the code covered a huge range of offenses: theft, murder, family disputes, business dealings. It's all in there. It really reveals their values and priorities, gives us this window into their beliefs about justice, social order, you name it.
So it's pretty comprehensive. But what I find so fascinating is that these ancient laws, they give us this glimpse into what Sumerian society actually valued.
Yeah.
So, like, what can we learn from the Code of Ur-Nammu about their beliefs and priorities?
One of the big takeaways is their strong emphasis on protecting property. Like, punishments for theft were super severe, which makes sense if you consider their focus on trade and economic prosperity.
Absolutely. Protecting their assets would have been, like, crucial to their success, but was justice equal for everyone? Or did social status play a role in how the legal system worked?
Well, this is where it gets even more interesting. The punishments, they often differed based on the social class of both the victim and the perpetrator.
Okay, so justice wasn't exactly blind in ancient Sumer. Tell me more. I'm eager to understand how this system worked.
Well, for example, if someone from the elite class injured a commoner, they might just face a fine. But if a commoner injured someone from the elite, the punishment could be much harsher, even death in some cases.
So a hierarchical system of justice, very much like their social structure.
Yeah, you could say that.
It makes you think about how much things have really changed, right? I mean, examining these ancient laws, it makes us think about how our own legal systems have evolved over time,
Yeah.
how societal values shift, and what principles have stayed the same. It's like holding a mirror up to our own society.
That's a great way to put it. The Code of Ur-Nammu might be ancient, but the questions it raises about fairness, equality, the role of law in society, they're just as relevant today as they were thousands of years ago.
Yeah, it's amazing to think about these ancient laws, right? Literally carved in stone. It's like a reflection of their values. Makes you realize how much work goes into building a stable society, even way back then.
Oh, absolutely. We keep talking about this Code of Ur-Nammu, but like, what did it actually look like to break the law in ancient Sumer? Were there like Sumerian jails?
Well, prisons as we know them today, those didn't really exist back then. Punishments, they really varied, depended on, how bad the crime was. And like we said, your social status played a big part. Fines, forced labor, corporal punishment, those were all pretty common.
Yikes. Not the
So,
system I'd want to mess with. But what about like the most serious crimes, like murder? Did they have the death penalty?
yes, the death penalty was definitely a thing in ancient Sumer, reserved for, well, the worst offenses. Pretty stark reminder of how harsh life could be. Yeah, no kidding. Makes you appreciate the challenges of creating a functioning society, especially back then, right? With all the difficulties they faced.
Exactly. To establish a legal system, enforce the laws, make sure there's at least some sense of justice.
Hmm.
That was a huge undertaking. The Code of Ur-Nammu, yeah, it might seem harsh to us now, but it really shows their commitment to creating order and stability. It wasn't just about punishment, right? It was about like setting up a framework for a functional society.
And speaking of a functioning society, we got to talk about the role of women again,
Hmm.
because they had a surprising amount of rights and responsibilities, didn't they?
They did. Sumerian women enjoyed a level of autonomy that you don't really see in a lot of other ancient cultures. They could own property, engage in trade, head their own households. It suggests a much more nuanced social structure than we typically imagine.
It really flips the script on how we think about women in ancient societies. We talked about
Mm.
in Hedwana, the high priestess and poet. Her work is just amazing. But what about the everyday woman? What were their lives like?
Well, think about it. Women weren't just, stuck at home doing domestic stuff. They were out there participating in the economy and religious life. We see evidence of women working as merchants, weavers, even brewers. Imagine that bustling marketplace we talked about. Women are there, bargaining for goods, running their own businesses, contributing to the city.
It's so cool to imagine them as these vital members of the community. This level of female participation must have had a significant impact on their culture, on daily life.
It definitely did. And it wasn't just happening behind closed doors. It's reflected in their art, in their legal codes, like the Code of Ur-Nammu, for example. It actually includes provisions specifically about women's rights and protections.
Wow, really? Can you give us an example of one of those laws? I'm super curious to see how they addressed, women's issues in their legal system.
Sure. For instance, the code states that if a man accuses his wife of adultery but can't prove it, well, he's the one who faces a penalty. And it's not a small one. This suggests that women actually had some legal recourse against false accusations. Pretty remarkable for that time period.
Yeah, that is pretty remarkable. It suggests that women's voices actually mattered, that their rights were acknowledged to some extent, at least, within the legal system. Makes you wonder how these laws actually affected the lives of everyday Sumerian women.
It's a question worth thinking about. We can't know for sure, but just the fact that these protections existed, it suggests that, Sumerian women had more agency and influence than we maybe give them credit for.
For sure. Okay, so we've talked about their social structure, the role of women, this fascinating legal code. But what about the economy? What can we learn from their economic innovations? What can they teach us about our own systems today?
Well, the Sumerians were true pioneers. I mean, think about it. Their development of a monetary system based on those standardized units of silver, that paved the way for like way more complex economic interactions. Imagine the impact of being able to track value consistently, to trade goods and services and have a shared understanding of worth. It revolutionized the way they did business and set the stage for the development of modern financial systems.
It's crazy to think that something developed over 4,000 years ago, you know, basically laid the groundwork for the entire global economy we have today.
It's pretty mind-blowing. And their record keeping, right? All those cuneiform tablets, they give us this amazing insight into all their economic activity.
Exactly, like reading their diaries almost, a firsthand account of how they lived, how they worked, how they, traded.
It's incredible. They documented everything. business transactions, contracts, inventories, even personal letters. It's a gold mine of information.
Their innovative spirit is just so inspiring.
It really is, and their contributions are undeniable. From agriculture and irrigation to trade and finance, Sumerian ingenuity really shaped the course of history. Their innovations, they still resonate today. It's a reminder of human creativity and how
Yeah.
we're all connected across time.
Yeah, it's humbling to think we're linked to these ancient people, that their innovations are still, in a way, with us.
They are, and it reminds us that history isn't just about, dates and names in a textbook. It's about understanding real people's lives, their struggles, their achievements, their impact on the world.
Well said. I think we've covered a ton of ground today, from the nitty-gritty of their legal code to those groundbreaking economic innovations. Sumerian society was clearly so much more complex and advanced than I think most people realize.
And we're back. Still diving deep into the world of the Sumerians. We've covered their social structure, their laws, their economy. But what about their beliefs, their worldview? Like, who were these people on a deeper level?
Well, to really get the Sumerians, you got to understand their beliefs. They were polytheistic.
Hmm.
So that means they believed in multiple gods and goddesses.
Right, right.
And each of these deities represented different parts of nature or
Yeah.
different aspects of human experience. And their pantheon, oh, it was huge and complex. They had deities for everything: the sky, the earth, love, war, wisdom, you name it.
So it sounds like these gods were like really present in their daily lives, influencing everything from the weather to their harvests. Absolutely. I mean, their mythology is it's full of stories about these deities, their interactions, with each other and with humans. And these stories, they weren't just entertainment. They were a way for the Sumerians to understand the world around them, to explain the forces of nature, to figure out their place in the cosmos.
So we're not talking like bedtime stories here. We're
Right.
talking about like a whole way of life,
Right.
a way to explain, well, the unexplainable.
Exactly. And their religious beliefs, they were just completely woven into their society. Like we talked about the temples, right? They weren't just for worship. They were economic hubs, administrative centers.
Yeah, it's all connected.
And priests, priestesses, they held real power. And religious rituals, oh, those are a huge part of everyday life.
It's amazing how it all ties together. Like their beliefs influence their social structure, their economy, even their legal system.
It really is. It shows you how deeply spirituality was embedded in their culture. And speaking of culture, I think one of the most important things the Sumerians gave us is their writing system, cuneiform.
Cuneiform, those little wedge-shaped markings on the clay tablets, right?
Yes.
Must have taken some serious skill and patience to learn to write like
Well,
that.
it did. Imagine, you're using this reed stylus
Yeah.
to like press these symbols into wet clay.
Yeah.
And cuneiform, it wasn't just like a practical tool for record keeping. It allowed them to preserve their history, their literature, their ideas for us, for future generations.
It's because of cuneiform that we have all these amazing insights into their lives, their myths, their laws, their business dealings, even their personal letters. It's like we have this direct line to their thoughts,
Yeah, it's really incredible. And cuneiform, it wasn't just for, like official stuff. We also see examples of literature, epic poems, hymns to their gods and goddesses. They had a rich literary tradition, and it was all passed down because of this incredible writing system.
It's just mind-blowing to think
Yeah.
that we can still like read these stories, these poems, these expressions of human emotion, of creativity from thousands of years ago.
It's pretty powerful. It reminds us of our shared humanity, how people across time, across cultures, we've all grappled with the same big questions: life, death, the meaning of it all. The Sumerians, they might be, far away from us in time, but they faced a lot of the same challenges, celebrated a lot of the same joys, just like we do today.
Yeah, it really makes you think. So as we kind of wrap up our Sumerian deep dive here, what would you say is like their most enduring legacy? How did they change the course of history?
It's hard to narrow it down. They made so many contributions. They laid the groundwork for writing, for math, for astronomy, law. Their innovations in agriculture and irrigation, well, those helped feed growing populations. And their development of a monetary system, well, that totally changed how people traded and did business.
It's a lot.
It is, but I think maybe their most important legacy is their spirit.
Yeah.
their spirit of innovation, their willingness to, to experiment, to push the boundaries of what was possible.
Like, they weren't afraid to try new things.
Yeah.
And look at the impact they had.
Exactly. They really show us what humans are capable of,
Yeah.
They built this incredible civilization from pretty humble beginnings in the Fertile Crescent, and they influenced the course of history for thousands of years.
And their story isn't over, right?
Yeah.
I mean, every time archaeologists find something new or scholars decipher another cuneiform tablet, we learn more. Their legacy, it keeps inspiring us.
Right. It does. It makes us want to be more creative, to push our own boundaries, to make our own mark on the world, just like they did.
So that's it for our deep dive on Sumerian society. But, we've only scratched the surface. There's so much more to learn. So keep exploring. Read their myths, study the cuneiform tablets, visit a museum. Let your curiosity lead the way. You never know what you might discover.